right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel.
I'm Dennis.
I'm Sam.
Welcome back. We've been off a couple of weeks. How you doing, Sam?
We did. We took a little week break there. Yeah. I'm good. A little over a week, I guess. Certainly feeling better, which is nice. It's been busy around here between, you know, daddy daycare and rehearsals. The show is now in previews,
Mm-hmm.
and Lifeline, for their understudies, they have this thing where you have to attend all the preview performances.
Yep.
So a lot of theaters, it might only be like one a week, or that sort of thing, but you have to attend all tech rehearsals and all preview performances. So it's basically like I'm in tech and previews, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. I
Sure.
mean, I
Yeah.
love being there, but it has certainly added a lot of extra hours to my day. But it's good. Yeah. I mean, I can't complain.
Sure. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're doing good. We had family in town visiting. My wife's sister was in town visiting for a week, which was a lot of fun. Kind of sad at the end because Harrison, our 5-year-old, like he really, really adores Amelia,
Yeah.
and he was like sad 3 days before she left
Oh no.
that
Oh
that she
man.
was going to be leaving. Um, and actually, like the night after we dropped her off, like we were like doing bedtime together, and we were talking. I can't remember what he said, but he said something about missing her and his heart being sad or something. And I was like, well, it's okay. Like, it's okay to be a little heartbroken, like when someone you miss leaves or something or whatever. And he said, my heart isn't broken. It's just not fixed yet.
Oh.
Like, I got to write that down.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's
And then we
that's
didn't
that's
get,
a great lyric.
yeah, but then we didn't record earlier this week because my wife Betsy, she was under the weather. So yeah. So yeah.
So we're coming at
So
you a little late. A little late this
coming
week.
coming at you a little late, but we're coming at you this week
Oh no.
with how the Tess was won. I can already tell from our text messages. This is gonna be a fun. This is gonna be a fun conversation.
Yeah. I think so. We'll get into it all later, but I'm looking forward to it. I think that this will be potentially one of the more interesting ones that we've had thus far.
Mm-hmm.
With the journey through the first season. So, but before we get to that, we certainly want to take a moment to thank our supporters, because we have a new
Yes.
supporter this week. And I'll just give him a shout out. He's a very dear friend of mine, who was actually a groomsman in my wedding. I've mentioned him on the podcast numerous times before. Just a brilliant guy, full of heart, wonderful human being, and that is my friend Christopher Redmond. So, Chris, thank you so much for the support. Your comments, on a pretty much a weekly basis, about something that you've heard, something that tickled you, or something that inspired you. I've always been. Just an incredible piece of support that has carried me through on this journey, that is for sure. And of course, our conversations on myriad topics that have nothing to do with Quantum Leap or the podcast have been a source of endless enjoyment as well. So, I know him, so I can give him that tribute, that shout out.
Sure.
We don't know our other supporters quite as well, but
Mm-hmm.
Dennis, why don't you drop their names at the very
Our
least and
other
give them a big
supporters, yeah,
thanks?
Audra Ashley and Dana Buse. Thank you so much. I think Audra is a relatively newer listener. Dana, I
I believe
think
so,
she
yeah.
has been with us from the beginning.
Yeah,
5 years coming up.
I mean, at this point, we know each other, so
And then, yeah, those we know. Yeah, yeah,
or at least she knows us.
yeah, for sure. Other
Thank you
house,
both so very much.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah. Other housekeeping, find us on the web, fateswidewheel.com. Last episode, I said I was going to set up a new email, fateswidewheel at Gmail. Well, it turns out, Sam, you know what?
What?
Someone took that
You
email.
got to be kidding me.
So we are Fates Wide Wheel Podcast at gmail.com. We'll put it in the show notes. If you have sent us an email to that other one, so sorry, somebody else got that email.
They're gonna
If
hold it
they
for
were, if
ransom.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So yeah. One thing, well, we'll talk about it more at the end of the episode. We're going to start including listener mail
Yes.
into our episodes, and I would say, just for the sake of clarity, because we do get a lot of comments on our other things, we'll just say, if you want to send us a piece of mail that you want us to read on the air and interact with, we're going to direct you, send it to our email, so there's no confusion over, are you commenting just to comment on social media, or do you want to interact with us?
Yeah.
You
Plus, to
know,
be completely
we do
frank,
the
it's a
podcast.
lot easier to pull up an email than it is to go search through comments off of a of a thread. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm not always the best host when it comes to being able to recall names and the specifics of what was said. So there have been numerous
Sure.
times where I've been like, a listener said,
Somebody, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I would love to be able to give full credit where it is due. So please, yeah, send us those emails. And certainly, I know Dennis wants to. I mean, I want to as well, but it was Dennis's idea to have an audio component to that as well, so that you can send us audio messages. And we have a couple, I believe that we certainly want to integrate into the podcast. We just haven't necessarily found the right way necessarily to do that. We have one that we're definitely going to share with you.
Sure.
Probably not this week, but maybe perhaps next week, and then we'll kind of continue to do that as we have the time, because we do want to try to, for now, keep
Mhm.
our episodes a little shorter. Once the pilot comes out and the new episodes start dropping, we'll probably push 2 hours again. You never know.
Phew. We're gonna have to figure out how that works, because I know we're gonna be. We're gonna go on a tangent, and the point of these episodes are to keep this short. So we'll
right.
I got excited earlier because I just started thinking that one thing that we're gonna have to start talking about when the new series comes on is how we talk about spoilers on our social media.
Ooh, yes, very good point.
Like, how much time do we give people to watch the episode before we just fully?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that obviously the podcast is going to be
Oh yeah,
just
absolutely, yeah. But like
total spoilers. But
social media
yeah, when
channels,
it
yeah,
comes to the social media channels, yeah, I certainly I would like to maybe give people a little bit of time. It also depends, I suppose, on exactly how the show is airing. I mean, it does indeed seem that it's full on NBC, not
sure.
Peacock, which is something that we've already talked about and alluded to before. And in that instance, it feels like it's more like live destination television. So, I certainly, when it comes to the pilot, I would imagine that we'll do a bit of a tweet along, live tweet of the pilot. I can't imagine that we're going to not that we're going to
Oh
wait
God,
to
yeah.
talk about it. So we'll probably live tweet the pilot, but of course that's all
In the
in the
future.
future.
So yeah. So speaking of new series, new news. Nothing that came. Kind of semi-direct channels. Shout out to the Quantum Leap podcast. I'm sure you've
Yes.
seen. They had an interview with Deborah Pratt. Deborah, try that again. Deborah Pratt from the original series. She wasn't able to give a whole lot of information, obviously, but she did drop a couple of nuggets. That one, like you said, she is convinced that this is going to be NBC, not Peacock. And two, they finished editing the pilot over the weekend and sent it off to the network.
Yeah, which is pretty fast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a couple weeks, I mean, and,
Mhm.
and not that that's unheard of by any stretch or anything like that, but when you've got a pilot, when you're assembling a lot of footage, when you're, kind of striking that tone and everything, I mean, that's, to me, what that says is you've got, a director, an editor, and producers that have their shit together, that
Mhm.
know exactly what they want from this, that, that they were able to go in. And again, based off of what we already know and what we saw coming out of production and everything, it does seem like that is, yes, the case, that they knew exactly what they wanted, that they were able to do it, put it together, and get it out there. I think one of the things that this also tells us is that there's a very, very good chance that, we could have a better idea about series pickup by late May, as opposed to having to wait until, late
Sure.
summer, early fall. So we'll see,
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. Fingers
It's
crossed.
going to get picked up.
Absolutely. I I
If I'm a
I
betting man, I'm,
I have very little doubt.
yeah,
Very little doubt. Bracing myself for that 1%, but other than that, very little doubt.
right.
Anyway, so with that, go ahead, I should say, yeah, go listen to their
Yes.
entire episode. It doesn't look like they have it out on streaming yet, but it is on YouTube. It is on their website. But that being said, with that, do you want to introduce us to
Yes.
our new scoring system
Indeed.
for those playing along at home?
So our mission is to rank the show on a scale of 1 to 10 based on 5 different categories: writing, directing, acting, production values, and mythology. Each category is weighted based on importance. And that's, our perceived importance of them. Writing, directing, and acting are each worth 25% of the average. Production values are 15%, and mythology is 10%. Our original reviews sought to stimulate discussion and contextualize the episode based on when it was set, when it aired, and when our discussion took place. Of course, we also provided background information and our personal opinions of each episode and lots of tangents. We're proud of those reviews, and of course, they will continue to be available for listeners in our archive. Meanwhile, we wanted the opportunity to revisit the episodes with only our opinion of the categories above above, giving listeners a compact rating of each episode of the classic series in the lead up to the premiere of the new series in fall of 2022. Have our opinions changed for the better, for the worse? Will this new rubric yield results that surprise even us? Let's find out. Dennis, how the Tess Was Won.
How the Tess Was Won. We're going to IMDb this time with user Gary KMCD. It seems like he's written a lot of great sum ups here. How the Test Was Won. Sam leaps into the body of a Texas veterinarian, Dr. Daniel Young, who carries a torch for a local ranch owner's daughter, Tess McGill. She has a stubborn streak and refuses to marry any man who is unable to out-ranch her. She makes a bet with her dad that she will give Young 1 week to prove he could be a better rancher than she is, and if he does, she will marry him. Young's helper at the veterinary practice, who we'll get to, proves to be a bit of a surprise.
Indeed.
All
this
right.
episode was written by Deborah Arkalian and directed by Ivan Dixon. I just wanted to throw that out there. I know we haven't really necessarily been doing that with the previous episodes, but
sure.
Figure want to give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into the first one on our list, the writing. What did we think of the writing of this episode?
All right, here's the thing that I'm going to say overall. This episode is sexist as crap. This episode would not even come close to being produced in 2022, at least not with some more scathing commentary on the plot of the episode itself. That being said, I really had a fun time watching it. I enjoyed it. I laughed out loud a lot. I forgot a lot of the comedy bits in the episode. I have not watched this episode since we reviewed it originally back in 2017, and our friend Claire Feeney, shout out, she was our guest on that episode, and we had a fun conversation there. So I haven't watched it since then. And
same here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it may be important to note that when we were reviewing the first season, that's just when the Me Too movement was starting, back in the fall of 2017.
Yeah,
and that colored a lot of everything, like every conversation that we were having in pop culture. But I know it colored a lot of our discussions in those early episodes, and I can't remember if it started yet or not when we dropped this episode, but it was right around that time.
Yeah, I think it would have been shortly after, because I feel like it really didn't start ramping up until about November. And we would have, and this episode would have dropped probably in like late September, early October,
somewhere in there. Yeah,
just based off of when we started recording.
But
yeah, my response to that would be that on one hand, I completely agree with a lot of what you said. I think that it would be interesting to see the type of commentary that would be made. I think that Sam would react to some of the situations very differently, and not even if the show is being produced in 2022, but even by season 2 or 3, Sam would be reacting very differently to some of these situations, the way the character was written.
Sure.
Now I can make up a headcanon excuse for that being, that after he leapt into Samantha Stormer, that changed his view on some things and moved him forward, if you will. But even then, I just feel like there's one of the biggest problems that I have with this episode is that it is very bland, perfunctory, and very much just endemic of 1980s television. This is a Magnum PI episode. You know what I mean? Not literally, obviously there are huge differences, but it's that style. And so Sam has to be that kind of man. And I feel like for me, the episode it's just average. It's not a bad episode, but it's certainly not a good episode. That's where I kind of felt overall. And the writing, I feel like, is very much indicative of that. There's a couple of good moments. There's a couple of good twists. The best twist in the entire script comes at the poker game, when it turns out that Marshall Teague's character is dealing the best hand to Tess. I think that's a really nice twist. Other than that, it's just it's your standard fare, and there's nothing wrong with your standard fare. I mean, I'm a guy who has enjoyed many an episode of Murder She Wrote in the middle of the night when I can't sleep, and you don't get much more standard fare than Murder She Wrote. Now, Angela Lansbury is amazing and awesome and wonderful, and I could watch her do anything, but
Sure.
when it comes to the script, like it's it is what it is. So I just think that the writing to me was not incredibly strong. It didn't say anything. It didn't really move anything forward. Um, I will say that when it comes to the mythology, there were some interesting bits and bobbles that got dropped, especially about Al being able to, see, be seen rather by animals. The stuff with Gushy and Tina and that sort of stuff. But even then, the way that a lot of that was written just feels like, okay, you're doing this because you needed to do something. It doesn't. Yeah, it just falls flat for me in a lot of places. Um, the humor over Buddy, and not, Sam not knowing his name, and just kind of like, the reactions that are given or whatever. To me, it's written well enough, but what sells it more than anything, I think, is the acting. So I gave a little bit more credit to the acting on that than I did the writing. um Overall, again, I felt like this was just a fairly middling episode in a lot of ways, so I went ahead and just gave it a 5.
Okay. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Now, one thing I did enjoy about the writing, I love the one-liners just throughout. Like, I've heard it, like, just like the one, especially with, like, like Sam and Al, and like at the poker game, like the comments about the bull, like, half of them just stand, I can't remember, like half of them stand back and just admire the work. I can't remember like what the exact line was, but it's just like, I've always enjoyed that line.
Sure.
Enjoyed it so well, I can't remember it right now off the top of my head, apparently. But anyway, I also like how the narration over this episode, Sam talks about how, like, every time he leaps in, he has to do a song and dance about, figure out, like, who he is and like where he lives and everything. And I did appreciate that. And I had forgotten how many times they come back to the bit of how he can't remember Buddy's name throughout. Like,
Yeah.
he keeps saying Pard, and it turns out Pard is the dog's
name. Yeah.
And how, like, he just mentioned, like, he has to call, he just calls Buddy the boy, in the one part of the episode where he has to take Tess back after she has heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
I just like those bits throughout.
No, and you know what, I agree with you on that, and I think that there are some highs to this. I think, like I said, the poker game, Sam's narration overall, like the line that he has about Wayne dancing as well as he did when he was like in kindergarten or whatever.
Oh God, I love that part. Yeah.
That's really nice. The problem with it is, and it's funny because as I was watching the episode, I was like, I kind of forget exactly how Wayne gets together with Tess. There's got to be something that happens and whatever. And then when it happens, and it's like, no, this is not good. This is not, I'm sorry, there's nothing to me about this that is interesting or feels good about the idea of, the doc gives her all these things that he's written for her, because he's been in love with her and too afraid to say it. And then Wayne shows up and does the same damn thing, and she chooses Wayne because he's hunkier than the doc is. It's like, give me a break,
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where ultimately I end up enjoying bits of it, but when I think about the whole, it doesn't hang together
Sure.
well enough for me to say, this deserves a 6 or 7 or higher,
Sure. Totally understand that. Yeah. The episode, I can justify like a lot of stuff, like even the, like the whole, like, sexist nature of it, but everything. Yeah. When we get to the end and Wayne just swoops in, and basically it just comes down, he's hunkier.
Right. And Al even has that thing. It's like, you didn't have a lot to work with, Sam, and it's like,
yeah. Also, and you talk about, I put it on Twitter that we're recording tonight, and one of our longtime listeners, Larry Trujillo, I apologize if I'm butchering your last name.
Trujillo?
Was it him? Yeah. So he puts out, what's up with Doc wearing glasses in the mirror, and whatever. And the one comment I will make about that is, like, yes, that is very out of line with what they did later on in the series. But right. I will say, for that far, it was actually pretty in line. It doesn't bug me. Like, in a couple of episodes, he's going to leap into Cam, and Cam has braces.
Right.
And Sam doesn't have braces on his teeth. And when you think about the broader thing of, you know, a lot of times like Sam leaps into a woman, but sometimes they style Sam's hair accordingly and sometimes they don't. So I could deal
Sometimes
with
he
that.
wears makeup, sometimes he doesn't.
Sometimes he doesn't. And
Yeah.
you know, it's less of a stretch because like at this point, they hadn't made it clear whether or not it was Sam's body leaping or Sam's mind leaping.
Right.
And so if Sam's body's leaping and he's putting on glasses, that creates a thing of like, well, if he has 20/20 eyesight and he puts on a pair of glasses, what happens?
Yeah.
I
Wait,
don't
but
know.
doesn't he put on glasses in Starcrossed?
He does.
Yeah.
He does put on reading glasses. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there.
So, yeah.
Anyway, we're getting way
Yeah.
off on a tangent here. Like
Right,
we're
right, but I mean it is,
yeah,
but it is something worth noting, and I think we did talk a little bit more about it in our original episode, you know,
sure.
and we didn't, again, frankly, we didn't really come to any solid conclusion because one of the things that we did even originally, and I think we kind of continue to do somewhat, is give the first season a couple of passes, you know, like even like with the out of character stuff for Sam here, I'm kind of just chalking it up to be like, okay, they're still figuring things out.
Mhm.
Um, but that to me it's one of those things where it's like I can excuse some things but there are other things I'd rather not excuse. And to me, if and I know that this is not the way that it often happens, especially in the 80s and you know in early 90s, if you go back and you look at television, there are a lot of programs out there that took a while to find their footing. I recently was watching the first season of the X-Files, and there are some great episodes in that first season. There are also some episodes where you're just sort of like, what in the hell is happening?
Sure.
Like the acting feels off, the writing is terrible, the lighting is weird. Like it's just like what show were they making? It's like all of a sudden it feels like a soap opera with Dana at a you know birthday party for a friend, and it's like what the hell is going on here? And even though that they would toy with a lot of stuff later on in the series, it just didn't fit. Anyway,
Sure.
we're getting way off
We're way
topic.
off topic.
So
I'm gonna do it. But the thing is, like, as far as the writing concerned, and this is why I originally brought back like the standing in the mirror looking at the glasses. I can more buy that Sam's not wearing glasses, but the reflection is.
hmm.
Are you telling me that Sam was there for a week plus and didn't look in the mirror?
Right,
Because that's what that
right.
scene is
Yes,
implying.
yes, yes. Right. I'm glad you brought it up because that was something else that I was thinking about as well. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't buy that. Yeah, I mean, he showered, he took baths, he, you know, any normal human when you get out of the bath or whatever, the mirror's there. You go to the
Yeah.
bathroom, you wash your hands, the mirror is there, you know. Um,
Especially when I know when I look in the mirror, I'm not going to see me.
yeah, right?
I'm going to be a little curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it is what it is.
Is what
Directing.
it anyway, directing. Here we go. Yeah.
Again, I felt like this was fairly paint by numbers. There wasn't anything that stood out to me. I appreciate the fact, obviously, that you know they were dealing with like real live animals and they had to do some horse stuff and that sort of thing. But again, there's some weird there's some weird like where they zoom in on the image as opposed to the camera actually zooming in. There's some weird like odd almost like slow motion bits that aren't intentional that they're done because like the you know they captured footage and didn't have enough so they slowed it down, you know, they play the time. Overall I feel like this is married a little bit to production values. Overall I just again I felt like the direction was fairly middle of the road. Nothing really stood out to me, so I gave it a 5.
Mm. Damn, you brought up some good points. I want to adjust my score. Do I want to adjust my score? Sure, I'm going to adjust my score. I'm going to knock it down to a 6. I had it at an 8,
Yeah.
but yes, you brought up a lot of good points. Yeah, there were a lot of bits like where like they zoomed in or they slowed down. Like there's one particular cowboy in the beginning
Yep, that's
scene. Yeah, where it's
yeah.
like, what? That like you never see that character again. Why did you just give him this
Yeah.
slow-mo intro? Yeah.
And there are a couple of scenes too with Tess and her father that I missed out on the intimacy of those scenes, which I feel like could have really lent itself to the story well had we had you know quite frankly some better direction, you know, some close-ups, some you know, and I get it, you're working, you know, you've got a schedule, you've got you know all this sort of stuff, you might not have had time to get the coverage on both shots or whatever, but ultimately yeah it just felt a little like if it just felt a little bit lazy maybe. And
Sure.
that's and I hate to use that because it's a very judgmental word and I don't want to judge the director, you know, that they were being lazy because again maybe there were time constraints or whatnot, but it nothing about it felt a you know above the bar to me. Felt like
I
they just
gotcha.
went in, they got their paycheck, and they went home.
I gotcha. That totally makes sense. Now that being said, and I'm going to put this over in the production instead of directing. We'll get more into it there, but this is just a beautiful episode as far as like when they do the outdoor shots, because
Yeah,
they have far more expansive outdoor shots, especially in the cattle lassoing scene,
right.
where you just get a lot more, especially like in the later seasons, you didn't get outdoor shots like that
The
as much.
location shooting is nice. I will agree with that. But you know, again, going back to the directing, even then it feels like there's some of the location shots that just feel a little bit wasted. Like when they're doing the fence posts and everything, it just becomes about Sam being shirtless and Tess passing out, which is fine. That's a part of the story, but you could have maybe told it in a way that was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, considering you're outdoors and they're actually doing these things. You know,
Scott Bakula is not wearing a shirt.
Larry Ganny had something to say about that.
Larry Ganny had something to say. How much more aesthetically
Larry Ganny's
pleasing?
wife had something to
Larry
say about
Ganny's
that.
wife had something to say about that. Hey, you know, I'm secure in my masculinity. I could say Scott Bakula is a handsome man. But anyway,
Oh, yeah. No, hey, I get it, man. You put a little sweat
I
on a
get,
dude and, you know, yeah,
I get what you're
you
saying.
know,
But yes,
he looks healthy. Um,
yeah. So I knocked mine down to 6 out of 10. So there we go.
okay.
There we go.
Acting. So here's something that's strange about this. There are moments of this episode that I really do enjoy. Um, some acting bits that I enjoy. I enjoy Marshall Teague's Wayne quite a bit more than I even anticipated. I think Marshall Teague is one of those guys that you know he's been in a lot of things. You've seen him in a lot of things, and he always does a really good job. He certainly kind of raises the level a little bit here for me compared to some of the other folks, because the other folks I just feel like are mostly doing caricatures, and even Tess to a degree. And I think that one of the things that kind of the episode falls flat for me is that I never, and this is partly the writing, partly the directing, but I also think it's the acting. I never understand why she chooses Wayne, and I never really understand what she gets from those letters that she doesn't get from Sam's diary. Do you know what I mean? Like I never
Mhm.
like if I'm supposed to believe that the only reason she chooses Wayne is because he's hunkier, you know, or whatever, I just then I don't care about these people because I feel like that's a really shallow reason. Like there's got to be more to it than that, and that never comes across.
But is that the actor's fault?
Not
Because,
entirely,
because I
but I do
don't
put
think
some blame on their shoulders. Yes.
I don't think they were given anything in the material at any point in the episode to show that Tess and Wayne had any sort of affection each other beyond a working relationship. Like you knew that they had worked together for a long time and that they knew each other really well.
Yeah.
And there's something maybe more like that they could have worked in there, just like with not like nonverbal stuff, but there was very little in the dialogue to give them a chance to like telegraph like, oh, of course they're going to get together.
So here's what I will say to that. Again, I do feel like this is, and the reason why I saved to talk about it till now is because I do think it's the acting as well as the writing and directing, and it's the reason why the writing and the directing ended up getting, you know, fives. I never get to see Tess's choice. You know, this whole episode has been about Tess's choice, and I never see her make a choice. She has no agency. She has, you know, it's one thing to ask Wayne for the dance. It's another thing to never actually, you know what I mean? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
never a moment, I never get a moment where I can connect with the character, whether it's dialogue or direction or an acting moment where she makes the choice. I never get to see that. And as a
Mm-hmm.
viewer, I feel like that robs me of the point.
Sure.
Now, I could certainly argue that the point of the episode has nothing to do with any of that, and it's all been smoke and mirrors, and the real story here is Buddy. But that also kind of pisses me off because the bait and switch also isn't powerful enough to really pull me through. So
Sure.
ultimately, all that said, I felt like, you know, I feel like Dean is great here. I feel like Scott does well with what he's given, but I also don't think he's necessarily given a lot. It's not a bad episode. It's not a great episode. I gave it a 6.
All right, fair enough. I will say one thing I always like about this episode, and they do this with a couple of the early episodes, is that as soon as Sam leaps in and we get him established, they almost immediately go to other characters and they set up the story. And that's what
Right.
they do with this one. Like almost like, oh, he's in, he's holding the pig, he's muddy, he's making an ass of himself. almost immediately they go over to I can't remember the character's name, the ranch owner Lance, the actor's name, to Dad. They jump over to Dad and Tess, like setting up Chance. That's his name. They jump over to Chance and Tess, setting up the events of the episode. If someone can outranch Tess for a week, she's going to marry him. Whatever. But then at the end, when she's dancing, they take away her agency. We don't get to see her make the choice. They make the end of the episode of being about, oh, Sam was actually starting to fall for Tess, and now he has to lose her.
Right.
And they kind of like, yeah, they kind of do a switch. And, you know, if you're only going to watch this episode once, like they meant us to back in 1989, sure, that works.
Right.
But it does not hold up. And I remember we had a long discussion about this in our original review. To me, I have never thought that this entire episode was about Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
I have always thought like, oh, that was just a nice little nugget at the end.
Think of when Sam leaves. It's see, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, because and again, the show would certainly play with exactly when he leaps, you know, later on in the series. But you look at Starcrossed, he doesn't leap when he reunites Donna and her dad. He leaps when, you know, what's her face and what's his face kiss.
Yeah.
And
Horny
you know,
McFace and yeah.
yeah. And in here, you know, he leaps after he gives Buddy Holly the lyric. So it's, you know, it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, it's the same thing in an episode that is wonderful. But in So Help Me God, you know, he leaps when he gives her the book. You know, because that's the thing that's important. So so I think you know, people can certainly make up their own mind, but for me personally, it does kind of feel like that's the purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which actually lends itself into a mythology thing that we'll get to in a second. So let's go to production values real quick. You know, production values on this episode I think are great. I think that, you know, that they do a good job. But there's also nothing too incredibly remarkable about it. That said, they've got horses, they got pigs, they got, you know, they had to do some stuffs here. So and as you mentioned, the location shooting and all that sort of stuff. So I'm gonna play it safe, and I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 7.
So, all right.
Because I did feel like, I felt like that was something they did well here.
I gave it a 9.5.
Oh wow!
I'm breaking
okay.
the rules. I don't know if I ever did. We ever did.
We've
points.
not,
like
but I
said,
think that's totally fine.
Yeah, like all of, like I said, all of the outdoor stuff for me, for like television on a budget, especially first season. I give it a thing. I knock it to 0.5 because the one brief scene towards the end of the episode where they show Chance and Tess on the porch of the house. They are obviously shooting in 2 different locations.
Yes.
And because I've seen episodes over and over again, I know that that's the standard house set that they use.
Right.
That's the house set from the Leap Back, where they have the conversation about how to mail the letter back, or how to mail the letter forward to Gushy. That's the house set from the one scene in the 3rd part of Trilogy. That's the porch.
Yeah.
That's their standard porch set that they use.
Sure.
And I could tell like those 2 things were being shot at 2 different places. And if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know, I love being able to point out like,
that's
when they reuse the sets. Hey, I'm a nerd, but hey, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel.
Yeah. at this point.
Yeah.
If you didn't already know that.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, I can understand why you went higher with it, and I think that that's totally, yeah. I don't have any huge quibbles with that. I think for me, again, the thing that just stands out is that it's fairly unremarkable, you know, in all ways. So for me, when I want, you know, and we'll get to the episode, so I don't want to necessarily spoil anything, but I certainly have episodes in mind that are gonna get a 9 or possibly a 10 when it comes to production values, you know. And for me, how the Tess Was Won just isn't quite it. Let's go into mythology. This is an interesting category for this episode because this, in my mind, is one of the first episodes where we don't really get. I mean, you could Right Hand of God, there's not a ton of stuff, but there is some good Al stuff, and there's some moments between Al and Sam in particular that I feel like lend itself to the overall, kind of arc, if you will, of the show. If you can even say that Quadribleep has an arc. I mean, we're certainly reading into things, but there are some things that pop out. Obviously, Al being seen by the animals, the conversation about Tina and Gushy, as we had talked about previously. I do feel like there is some layering that comes into play here, but it's not a ton. I might even be generous by doing this, but I ended up going with a 5.
Mm. I respectfully disagree, sir.
Oh, okay.
I gave it a 9
Wow.
because we get a lot. I mean, as far as the character of Al goes, we get a lot
Yeah, that's
between
fair.
Al, Tina, and Gushy because the love triangle between those three comes back and forth, not just only in the series, but through the novels as well.
I mean, you raise a really good point.
And just because of that, I gave it a 9 because to me, like that's like a huge part of the Al, Tina, Gushy saga.
I'll be damned. I think you have me. I think I'm going to change my score.
All right.
You've swayed me. You've swayed me.
That's right. I brought yours up. You brought mine way down.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think I feel like I'm not going to bump it up to. I think I'm just going to bump it up to a 6, but I think it
Mhm.
deserves to be bumped up above what I had it at.
Sure.
Because you're right. I mean, those are really really good points, and I think that the information in particular that we get about Tina and Gushy is almost more valuable than the information that we get about Al, to a degree, because when um, you've got characters that we never see, at least not much.
Mhm.
Uh, it's almost more important to get that information about them, and it adds more texture to the show. And clearly with the revival, we're going to see a lot of these people on a regular
Sure.
basis. We're going to see that home team every episode. Whereas in the original series, we saw them like not even half a dozen times.
Mhm.
So I think when you do hear mention of them, when you do get stories about them, it does add a lot of texture, a lot of layers to the mythology, if you will. And I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I'm not gonna, like I said, it's not enough to sway me too much higher, I suppose, right now, but maybe I'll rethink that. That said, overall, when I think about this episode, it just it is, and it's not a bad episode by any stretch. It's not going to drop below a 5 for me. It's not going to be under 50%. Anytime you can be above 50%, that says you did something right. Maybe not a lot. Maybe, you're just a serviceable episode, but there's nothing about this episode that makes me say I don't ever want to watch it again, or it would be best left forgotten as an episode of Quantum Leap or whatever. So yeah, it's certainly not my favorite episode of the first season. I don't think it's going to rank very high when it comes to how I feel about the overall first season. I don't think that it's going to, well, maybe it'll be last. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. Again, it's just an episode that is there. It, to me, there's a lot about this episode that feels very familiar in terms of this is how you write an episode of television in 1989, and to me, that's not a good thing.
Sure.
I if I'm going to rate something high using our scale, I want it to kind of do something. I want it to move me. I want it to move the characters. I want it to engage me. And this episode does not do those things. I do want to talk about Buddy Holly real quick before we get my final score here. Uh, the kiss with history is something that has already been established. We've already gotten a couple of moments with a kiss with history in one way or another, and this is the first kiss with history that is overtly like 100% direct. The kisses with history we've had before have not been this direct. We'll get more kisses with history that are kind of like this, but this is the one that really just cuts right to the Sam is interacting with someone who is incredibly famous, and he is actually changing the course of their life. When he interacts with Michael Jackson or Bill Clinton or any of those other people, does not change the course of their life. You know what I mean? The Watergate thing, he changes the course of things there a little bit, perhaps, but not really. Like the break-in was already happening. You know what I mean? He just happened to leave the door open. this he directly affects Buddy Holly. Um, the gag of Buddy Holly plays well. It's fine. I remember liking it a lot when I was younger. Not that I dislike it by any means today. I just don't know that it necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. I don't. To be completely honest, I don't know exactly how I feel about it. But I do remember when I was younger, I freaking loved it. I thought that this was the coolest thing.
I think it's great because I think it sticks with even casual fans of the show who have seen this episode. I
That's a very
remember
good point.
when we were starting this podcast and we were like debating like what to name it. Like we were debating like, you know, Fate's Wide Wheel, which is what we landed on, obviously. Oh boy, a Quantum Leap podcast. And when I was put like some of the possibilities on Facebook, one of my Facebook friends who was just like casually watched the show was like, you should call it Piggie Suey.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong. It
Yeah.
definitely is something that I think it is within the realm of Quantum Leap. It's an iconic moment.
Mm. And this time I was going to ask you, because I only thought about this for the first time watching this episode the last time. When Buddy is singing songs, making songs up earlier in the episode, are those melodies or tunes, are they anywhere close to other Buddy Holly songs? Were
You know
they
the
kind of telegraphing that earlier in the episode with
the
some of his lesser known songs?
the funny thing is that as I was watching it this last time, it's all the same song basically. It's all leading up to being Peggy Sue. It's just different pieces of it. It's different, and
Okay. Okay.
he's playing around with it a little bit, but it's basically all Peggy Sue.
Okay.
Um, God, it's just. I mean, the other thing is that it's still it is it kind of. I mean, it's full of humor. Let's face it. The fact that he's writing about a pig, and Sam suggests the Peggy Sue thing, and that's what leads to it. Now, of course, we could also talk about the fact that by 1956, Buddy Holly was also already, you know, not quite a star necessarily, but he was already touring and making music. He was
Sure.
already, this is so it's anachronistic to say the least. The other thing that
Sure.
we didn't mention actually, and I'm glad that I just remembered the year, is that of course this episode takes place before Sam Beckett was born.
No, it doesn't. It's
Yeah,
1956.
yeah.
He was born in 53.
Oh shit, that's right. No, I'm not gonna edit that out. I'm gonna let myself look up.
Okay, no, it's all
Um,
good.
that's right. That's right. That's yeah. You're absolutely right. God, for some reason I was thinking he was born in '58. My mom was born in '58. That's all besides the point. Thing
Sure.
is that by 1956, yeah, Buddy Holly was already a star and
Yeah.
or
But hey, you
started
know
making.
what? In the original history, Oswald killed Jackie too. That's my out in Quantum Leap. That's my out for everything. If everything is
I
slightly
went on a
off,
Lee Harvey Oswald diatribe today.
yeah, oh yeah,
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 yeah. We have a little thread with Matt Dale and I started talking about Lee Harvey Oswald. I'll leave that at that. But so anyway, in summation, it's not a bad episode. It's not a great episode. It's fine. It's what it is. The final score for me is a 5.65, which translates to a 57% out of a possible 100%. So that's where I stand with it. I feel very comfortable with that. It is without a doubt the lowest rated episode thus far, though not terribly lower than what I rated Starcrossed, which is odd to me because I feel like Starcrossed
so much.
is definitely better than this, but
Yeah.
and it is. I mean, it still ranks higher, but yeah. Anyway, there you have it.
Anyway, um, before I get my final score, one nugget that I didn't drop in any other category, and I didn't mention this when we reviewed Pilot or Starcrossed. I really like the invisible and imaging chamber door better than the rectangle of light.
Yeah, I
For
agree with
some,
you.
it's for some like simpler. It seems like a more sophisticated special effect than the rectangle.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you. I will say that's another thing, production value wise. We talked about this prior. This is one of the first episodes where Al's special effects look not great. Like prior to this, the special effects have looked good, especially for 1989. This to me is a marked downgrade over what we have seen in prior episodes.
You are correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, walking through that wall. Oh.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. When
Yep,
you
that's
walk through
fair.
that wall, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so my final score is 7.325,
Wow.
which I think, let me take a look here. Starcross, where do we land on that? Starcross was a 6.6.
Ooh, interesting.
You know what? I'm going to stand by it.
All right.
I'm going to stand by it because like this one overall, just, yeah, I'm going to stand by it.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get that. The thing about Star-Crossed is, and this is, you know, a larger discussion for a later time because we're already over our time a little bit, but one of the things about Star-Crossed is that I continue to feel like anytime I've revisited the episode, the place that it sits in my mind is very different from the reality of what the episode is.
Mm,
It feels like an important episode. It feels like a special episode, but when I watch the episode, it's just it kind of earned its 60% that I gave it. You know what I
sure.
mean? But the place that it resides at, you know, kind of in my memory, it feels like it should be like an 80%, you know,
Sure.
but it's
Yeah.
certainly not that. So I think that Starcross is one of those episodes that kind of gets the benefit of because it's kind of important, you know, because the characters involved. Um, it's almost as if somebody was just telling me about the episode without me having seen the episode. I would think that that's a great episode, you know? But then
Yeah.
when I actually see it, I'm just sort of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway, there you
fair.
have how the Tess was won.
One. There we go. One final nugget of trivia because Larry asks about this. Larry Trujillo asked about this on Twitter. We will not see, but we will hear Lance DeGault. Chance, we will hear him in one more episode of the series. He has the distinction of being the opening narrator for Another Mother
Oh, interesting.
because we keep having Sam introduce every episode up through about halfway through the second season. And
Yeah.
then they switch over to the saga cell that we're all familiar with, theorizing that one can time travel within his own lifetime, blah, blah, blah. But the first time we hear theorizing that one can time travel within his own lifetime, it is the voice of Lance DeGault
All
for
right
one
then.
episode.
Yeah. Huh. How
If,
about that?
yeah.
So I also wanted to point out one other thing. Dr. Sam Beckett on Twitter
Mm-hmm.
at Dr. Beckett, with one T, mind you, comments: These eps hold up well as Quantum Leap is a period anthology in essence. I even enjoy the opening narrations by Scott that a lot find cringe. One thing I will say, I definitely preferred Sam's narration in this episode to any of the narration we've seen thus far.
Sure.
This might be the best Sam narration except for the pilot. I think Genesis is great, but this might be the best Sam narration that we've gotten up to this point.
I will
Um,
agree. And if you will notice, he even the standard thing that we hear every week, he re-records that every week.
right.
Or they use a different take every week. And this is the best one that Bakula has done so far.
Yeah.
And the comment I will say, and I just caught like looking at their feed there. Yeah, it's Beckett is spelled correctly in the name, but the handle it's spelled
Right.
incorrectly. That
Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that
Chef's
before.
kiss on that one.
That's such a
Yeah.
nice touch. Calling it a period anthology piece, I really think the first season episodes they embrace that more because in the first season we do have a lot more scenes where okay we introduce Sam and his circumstances. Now we're going to go over here. We're going to have these characters have a scene and they have nothing to do with Sam.
I you know one of the things that I will say though is that the production value wise, the first season suffers from maybe being a little too ambitious. Like they haven't figured out how to be a period anthology piece within the
Mm-hmm.
constraints that they live in, and boy do they nail the hell out of that in season 2 and 3. Like in season 2 and 3, I feel like when they're supposed to be in 1969, it feels like yes they have inaccuracies and anachronisms throughout the series.
Sure.
I'm not trying to say that they hit it, you know, perfectly or whatever, but the episodes start to feel a lot better production value wise as the show goes on, and I think that that's because they figured out how to play with the tools they have, as opposed to like in Double Identity, which we'll talk about next week. Oh, you're on a Hollywood backlot. Like you're
Sure.
on, like you and not you're not just on a Hollywood backlot. You haven't even tried to convince me you're not on a Hollywood backlot.
Yeah, that's fair. So as a preview of next week, so I excuse me. I had already jumped ahead and I started watching Double
Yeah.
Identity for next week, and Betsy was in the room,
Oh
and
boy.
she was just like, I am not comfortable with these Italian stereotypes. I mean, she's not Italian by any means, but she was like, this is kind of cringy.
Yeah. 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 Well, 1989,
Yep.
baby. Yeah. 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 Again, that's one of the things that the show gets better at too. I feel like as it goes on, I
Sure.
mean, I think that the overall tenor of the show, once they embrace being a little bit more serious and a little bit more grounded, to me the show improves. And I know that that's not something that you necessarily wholeheartedly agree with, but and there are others out there that might not agree with that. But for me, the more grounded the show is, the more serious the show is. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean serious. I don't want
I
every
get, yeah,
episode to be black and white on fire. Don't get me wrong. But I do appreciate when the show takes itself a little bit more seriously, as opposed to being, you know,
sure.
others.
I got you.
So
I
yeah.
think we, yeah. So I think we wrap this up.
Yeah, for sure. I'm surprised that we ended up going a little bit longer, but hey, it's in our
Oh, sure.
nature. We
That's,
we
yeah,
uh,
of
we we we,
course.
we
Yeah.
struggle to keep it too succinct. So, yeah, I just obviously want to thank everyone for continuing to support the show, continue to listen, engage with us on social media. Again, all the supporters on Patreon, as I have said before, if you have a little extra money you're looking to donate, put it back into your community. Put it into a charity that means a lot to you. I will always, of course, shout out Doctors Without Borders in particular, UNICEF. I hold both of those charities pretty highly and donate to both of them myself. Not to mention, of course, ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center. That said, if after you've made your donations or put some money back into your community, you have a little something left over and you want to give it to us, by all means, hit up our Patreon.
On
I
slash
just
Fates
I
Wide
just got the
Wheel.
bill for
Yeah.
our hosting last week, so
Oh, yeah. So, so
so
like,
so yeah, help us out a little. I wouldn't
help
say
us out.
no.
And again, thank
Yeah.
you, Christopher and Audrey and Dana. Thank you once again. Like I
Yes.
said, hit us up, Fates Wide Wheel podcast at gmail.com with listener mail. And if it's just like, in general, just like comments on this episode, comments on what you heard in this episode. And I think what we want to try to do, if we get email, and just like start incorporating that as a regular part at the end of all of our
Yes.
epises, just reading off
Yeah,
some
and
pieces of mail.
one other thing that I want to throw out there too, and I would love to have some listener feedback on this. So feel free to comment on it, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook, or of course send us an email. But I do feel like since the announcement of the revival series, there has been just a little bit of an uptick in the mentions of Quantum Leap in general. And the place that I
God,
noticed it a lot recently was in every review of Russian Doll season two. They have compared the show to Quantum Leap. I have gotten so, because I get alerts, news alerts, through Google every time Quantum Leap is mentioned or whatever, and I have literally gotten. I'm not exaggerating, probably 10 to 15 Russian Doll season 2 reviews over the past week, and all of them, the reason I'm getting them is because they mention Quantum Leap. So I just think it's kind of interesting that with the announcement of the revival, there are people. There was a New York Times article just recently, I
mm,
believe, that also name checked Quantum Leap, which had nothing to do with entertainment. It was actually a rather sad piece, but talked about Quantum Leap. So I think that it seems to be a little bit more just in the public consciousness, and I would love to kind of hear if people agree with that.
for sure. Absolutely. Excuse me. Have you watched first season of Russian Doll?
Unfortunately, not yet. It's
Okay,
on it's on our watch list.
so the thing is, I think with the comparisons with Quantum Leap for season two, I think it's fair, because I think first season was very much a Groundhog Day
Right.
kind of premise, where every cycle ended with her dying. Now, it didn't end like literally on the same day. Like some cycles she would live a few minutes, some cycles she would live a few days, but she always ended up dying.
Yeah.
And that story completely wrapped up by the end of the first season. So I think what they're doing is like what they did with Groundhog Day in the first season. It really sounds like with the plot of season two, they are kind of aping Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
And it's her leaping back through her family's history to fix something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm interested in it.
Me too. I hope to watch it at some point in the near future. The other thing that I hope to watch very soon that I have not seen yet, that I have miraculously avoided all spoilers on, is Batman is now on HBO Max, and I cannot wait to finally sit down and watch it. I wish I would have seen it in a movie theater. I know I probably still could. Whatever. Blah 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 blah. I'm looking forward to finally sitting down and watching it.
I saw it in the theater and I loved it. I
Yeah.
really loved it. But as far as like a special effects experience,
Yeah.
you didn't need to see it in the theater.
Well, with
But you're
any
gonna
luck,
enjoy it. I really
fingers
enjoyed it. Yeah.
crossed. Yeah, with any luck, I'll be able to actually square away some time to do it this week because putting aside 3 hours to watch a movie these days, not the easiest thing in the world for me.
Not
But
the
I'm gonna give it a
easiest thing.
shot. I'm gonna give it a shot.
Well, good luck.
Um, anyway, with all of that said, I believe it's time for us to leap out of here.
In
Dennis,
here?
do you have anything else?
No more.
All right,
No more. We're
no
good.
more,
No, no. I
no
say that because like
more.
we go on so many tangents at the end. If you are
Right.
still here with us, thank you for listening all the way to the end. We are Fate's Wide Wheel. We will see you next week with Double Identity.
Yes, we will. Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves and one another. In the meantime, stay safe out there, and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
All right. See y'all.